So we'll go live in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to everybody joining us today, both those here in Leeds and to our online audience. I'm Jill Rutter. I'm a senior fellow at the Institute for Government, and I'm having to substitute for my colleague Akash Pound. Akash unfortunately sustained a football injury on Tuesday night and is being operated on today for his collarbone, which he's broken. I know he very, very much regretted playing football on Tuesday night and not being able to be with you because he's really, really deeply invested in the IfG DevoLab project. That's a project that we're doing in general in partnership with L&G, though today's event is in partnership with Arup, and we're absolutely delighted to be here in Leeds and be partnering with them. Now, I've not done a DevoLab event before, but we have a video to tell you what it's all about. So I am going to cue my colleagues to run our What is DevoLab video. Hopefully this works.
I'm a great believer in devolution. I'm a great believer in the idea that those with skin in the game, those that know their communities, make much better decisions than people sitting in Westminster and Whitehall.
Welcome to the IfG DevoLab, the Institute for Government's new platform for learning from the policy and governance innovations that devolution has enabled. Over the past decade, mayors and strategic authorities across many parts of England have taken on a growing array of powers, and they've begun to use them in increasingly innovative ways. A core benefit of devolution is the space it creates for places to develop their own solutions to common policy challenges, allowing policymakers across the country to learn from each other about what works and what does not. Devolution in this way can act as a policy laboratory, or what we call the DevoLab. Here are some examples of what we mean. In Greater Manchester, strides have been taken towards the creation of an integrated transport system with publicly controlled buses and trams, the B network. Local leaders in the West Midlands have repurposed the Adult Skills Fund to support thousands more people to secure advanced technical qualification. The Mayor of South Yorkshire, meanwhile, has championed a strategy to address health inequalities, for instance through the provision of free beds and bedding to under fives. In Tees Valley, the Mayor there has used devolved investment funds to save the local airport from closure as part of a wider economic regeneration strategy. In West Yorkshire, the Mayor is using her role as Police and Crime Commissioner to lead a strategy for reducing violence against women and girls. Greater London has even longer experience of devolution, a quarter century, and it's been the testbed for policies from congestion charging on the roads to public rent-a-bike schemes. And there's also much to be learnt from policy innovations in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. But how do we know what works, why it has worked, and what lessons mayors, local leaders and devolved bodies should learn from each other? Well, that's what the IfG DevoLab is for. As part of this, the Institute for Government will be hosting events, producing case studies, crunching the data and disseminating findings to help mayors and strategic authorities take better decisions about how to use their powers and budgets. So contact us with suggestions of innovative policies or governance reforms you think more people should know about, or if you'd like to work with us to make the DevoLab a reality.
Okay, so that's the DevoLab. And actually, I have a bit of a vested interest in this because ages ago, Akash and I wrote a IfG paper over 10 years ago, I think, called Devolution of the Policy Laboratory. But that was just about Scotland and Wales, because at the time there wasn't significant English devolution. That came later. So this is a really interesting example of taking that theory and putting it into practice. So we launched the series in July with an event looking at how mayors were using their power to tackle health inequalities. In October, we went to Birmingham to look at mayors' roles in securing investments. So today we're moving on to transport, which is one of the really big functions that is devolved. I think really important to do that, has high recognition among the public that it's a devolved function. It's not true of everything. And I think one of the things everybody is really, really interested in exploring is the links between better connectivity and growth, because one of the things that consistent reports suggest is that the UK really suffers from poor connectivity in our urban centres outside London, which effectively makes those areas less productive than they could be. So that's what we're exploring today. And I'm going to be joined by an excellent panel of speakers. So the format, slightly different from our general IfG format, is each speaker will give a short presentation, a case study of what is going on in their region, setting out, what they're doing, strategic authorities, mayors, other regional partners are doing to tackle some of those transport issues. So we'll hear from each of those speakers, and then Tom Bridges from Arup, delighted to be joined by him. He will give us some general comments. We'll then have a bit of a chat among ourselves, and then we will have a lot of time for questions, both from you in the audience here, but also from anyone online who wants to post their question on Slido. And if you're on Slido and you want to upvote a question, because it's almost as good as the question you were about to ask, please do that. Then I'll know what really people are super interested in doing. So let's turn now to our three presenters. And I'm delighted that we're going to be joined first by Councillor Susan Hinchcliffe. Susan is leader of Bradford City Council and chair of the West Yorkshire Transport Committee. She's going to talk about the strategic direction of transport across West Yorkshire, reflecting on the region's priorities and key projects such as West Yorkshire Mass Transit. So the floor is yours, Susan.
Thank you very much, Jill. And it is delightful to be here because I love devolution. So it's something I've wanted for a long time. We pushed it as leaders before we became Mayoral Combined Authority, and I was delighted to achieve devolution with a Mayoral Combined Authority back just before the pandemic hit us. So was that February 2020, sat down with Rishi Sunak, remember him? All the West Yorkshire leaders signed those documents, and away we are, and here we are today. So devolution is something that I believe in for all the reasons you just said there, Jill. It makes sure that decisions are made at the lowest level, and therefore economic growth should be the result of that, because it gets things done quicker. So I've always said, as Bradford leader, but also as former chair of West Yorkshire Combined Authority, transport, skills and culture are the three big things. Get those things right, and then you can absolutely transform your cities and your region. And of course, Bradford, obviously a UK City of Culture this year. We're having a lovely time. Do visit. But also we've made great strides in skills. We have lower than national average NEET numbers in Bradford, for example. We're the youngest city. That's quite an achievement. And on transport, we've just got a new platform away, Platform Zero at Foster Square, giving us 7 trains a day to London and back. And that is a real achievement, given that we've wanted that for the last 15 years. So those three things are really important, and that's why the Mayoral Combined Authority gives us an opportunity, particularly on transport and skills, those things that will go across region and indeed across nation, to make sure they're acting at the right level. Now, we've stated as a nation that devolution is really important. You heard that on the video there, actually. And just to give you a context of West Yorkshire, we're home to 2.4 million people. With 66 billion economy and a workforce of 1.2 million people. We've got the economy is £11 billion smaller than it should be, and that gap is projected to widen if we don't do something about it. And that's because the region has fewer jobs overall and lower productivity per job. So we may be a 66 billion economy, that's fantastic, but it should be 11 billion more than that. And the reason for that is obviously connectivity and skills. Those are the two main things. And if we improve connectivity, raise skill levels, we'll be able to close that productivity gap. And the productivity gap would grow the economy by 9 billion, and closing the employment gap would generate a further 2 billion and 44,000 additional jobs. And that is the key to unlocking everything. A lot of my time is spent mending or fixing things that have gone wrong. Actually, if you actually power the economy, then people have more successful lives, and therefore they don't need as much state intervention. So now we've got devolution. We've got Mayor Tracy Babrin is our mayor. We've got plans. We've got big plans when it comes to connectivity. We're going to deliver the phase 1 of the West Yorkshire mass transit system, which is the first line of West mass transit between Leeds and Bradford. Resolving the capacity issues at Leeds station, accelerating delivery of a new through station in Bradford, getting us onto TransPennine Express, which is what I need, and getting electrification between Leeds and Bradford. That's 12 minutes to Leeds from Bradford and 30 minutes to Manchester, halving the journey time. Reform of the bus network through franchising. So the Weaver network is something that we've launched, and we're working very hard now in an accelerated time space to actually get that achieved and get that delivered. Electrifying the Leeds Bradford rail link and the full Calder Valley line from Bradford to Manchester. Building on the TransPennine route upgrade, 11 billion investment in the north. And improving services on the Penistone line, providing more frequent and quicker journeys. So all that would help increase the effective size of the conurbation and boost productivity. We are big, but we're really poorly connected. People in Bradford can't get to jobs on the side of Leeds and vice versa. People have to move if they want to find work, and not everybody's got that opportunity. So we have the opportunity and investment like we've never had it before. And that's what I say to other leaders around the country who say, oh, I'm not sure about having a mayor, devolution. I say, well, why would you stand in the way of your people getting the investment they need to power jobs and growth? That's wrong of us to stand in the way of that. And I've seen all the investment we've had in Bradford in terms of transformation of the city centre. All that money's come from West Yorkshire Combined Authority via government. We would never have had that without devolution. So there's tangible difference that you can see because of devolution, that walking and cycling routes are so much better than they ever were. But collaboration is key. And it's all right saying, everything needs to be devolved to regions, but we also need to have regions devolved to local authorities and local authorities devolved to communities. And actually, there are some things that will always work best at national level, and we need to work across all of them. So I'm sure Richard will be talking about GBR, and gives us a real opportunity, a step change in making track and train come together to make devolution and delivery go faster. But then we have to be able to make sure that our mayors really collaborate properly across the north and beyond, so we can have those conversations about timetabling. Because otherwise, if we can't agree, then government will have to agree, and then that's reverse devolution. So then it becomes more centralised if mayors can't agree between themselves. So there's a great responsibility for us to act in a mature fashion nationally as well. So we've now got to move into delivery phase like we have never seen before. And that is a step change from lobbying and saying we want devolution to showing we're worth it and we can actually deliver on it. And that means we have to move at pace. We have to be able to work with communities. There's going to be lots of change that they see that they don't like building. People don't like change, but actually the result of it is what they do want. So we have to work with communities to get that. And we have to do all that at a time when public finances are constrained, and we all see the news. But if we don't build that infrastructure, if we don't do that transport, then growth gets even more stalled, and then we start to be in a very sorry place at all. So what we have to do is, you must have tried it, patting your head and rubbing your stomach. We have to do that all the time. You need to, build the car whilst it's still moving, something like that. But you do need to make sure you can do all those things at the same time, because actually people are looking to us now. Now we've got devolution, they're looking to us to deliver and show that we're worth it and we can do what we said we would do. Thank you.
Susan, thank you very much. So Susan, you can either come here or you can stay there, because the other two speakers have slide presentations. So up to you where you want to sit. But I'm delighted to welcome next up, doing fantastic on timing as well, our second speaker, Hugh Jenkins. Hugh is lead officer for transport policy at Liverpool City Region Combined Authority, and he's going to be speaking about Merseyrail, the region's commuter rail network serving Merseyside and adjacent areas, and sharing insights on that project, as well as some of its more recent innovations, where it might go, including possibly to Manchester. Anyway, over to you, Hugh.
Thank you very much, and thanks ever so much for the invitation this morning. It's lovely to be here. Nice to see so many people, and hi to everyone online as well. So yeah, I've got a few minutes just to take you through some of our devolution story from the Liverpool City region, which actually goes back quite a long way. as I'll show you. But just to set the scene, I'm sure everyone knows where Liverpool and Liverpool City region is, but there it is. 1.5 million, 1.6 million people, 45 billion economy, one of the largest west-facing seaports, which of course created Liverpool's history and Liverpool's economic legacy in so many ways, the gateway to the world. So there's almost a story there that transport created the Liverpool that we have today, from being a muddy pool as it once was to being the gateway to the empire and to the Americas and so forth. But devolution is certainly not a new concept to us in the Liverpool City region. A lot of people think it goes back to the mayor, it goes back just a few years, but actually, perhaps I'm extending this point a little too far, but I think we can go back to the 1920s, 1930s to look at devolution in the Liverpool City region. So the Mersey tunnels are a prime example, the two road tunnels underneath the River Mersey. They were never part of the national road network. They were promoted and built locally, and that's why they're tolled to this day. So it's a prime example of devolution in many ways. Government at the time was not prepared to build a tunnel under the River Mersey. The leaders of our former local authorities and our corporations worked together to create a joint committee, and that joint committee resulted in the construction of one of the world, well, it was the world's longest tunnel at the time, and it was built by people using picks and dynamite, and all credit that tunnel is still working really, really effectively and really safely to this day. The Mersey tunnel, the Mersey ferries, they've been under local control certainly since 1986, when they became part of Merseytravel's remit, and we're at the stage now where we're buying a new ferry through devolved funds because our current vessels are getting a little old. The newest is 60 years old, so that will regenerate the opportunity to cross the river. It's the best way of crossing the river, genuinely. Fast forwarding to the 1960s, we created a transport authority, as with so many of our other large cities. The passenger transport executives and authorities came around, and one of the big ambitions of our PTE back in the 1960s, early 70s, was around Merseyrail, so kind of the focus of what I'm going to touch on just now. And the Transport Authority really pushed hard and worked with British Railways and the government at the time to promote and to build what is now the Merseyrail network, particularly the Merseyrail loop and link. So we have 5 underground stations on either side of the River Mersey. All those once disparate rail networks are joined together, and I'll show you a little bit more about that in a moment. Merseytravel was abolished as a transport authority in 2014, where we became a combined authority. That also brought in Halton Borough Council into the fold. Halton was previously within Cheshire, but always had a close affinity with Merseyside. In many ways, Halton Runcorn was built as a new town to serve overspill from Liverpool, going back to the post-war era. So there was always a much stronger link between Runcorn and Liverpool than was back to Chester, for example. So that was a natural transition. Fast forward then to 2017, Mayor Rotherham elected as our directly elected mayor, and we're now an established strategic authority with that wide range of powers: planning, skills, economic development, transport, funding, and so forth. So much more than we had when I started work at Merseytravel 20 years ago. And like Councillor Hinchcliffe, I like devolution too, and I'm fortunate to work through that process. But if we just look at Merseyrail in a bit more detail, again, this goes back before our directly elected mayor, before our combined authority as well. It goes back to 2003. Coming up to a quarter of a century now. So the Merseyrail network, which is if you look at the map here, the blue lines and the green lines that go down to Chester, to West Kirby, up to Southport, up to Kirby, to Ormskirk. The Merseyrail network, as it was branded in the 1970s, that concession was devolved to Merseytravel at the time, the first in the country before London Overground. And that gave us the ability, collectively, our leaders, the ability to control fares, frequencies, service provision, and so forth. And it's no exaggeration to say that prior to devolution, it's a bit of a sorry story. You could never really guarantee, you could never really bet your bottom dollar that Merseyrail would turn up and get you to your destination. Misery Rail was used far too often back in the day. But we've moved it from Merseyrail to being the best performing operator in the UK, because of course devolution is important, control is important, but why are we doing it? We want to make things better. We want to make things better for people, better for end users, achieve our outcomes. That's what really matters. What Merseyrail has done, what that concession has done, is given us long-term certainty. So 25 years of certainty that we will have control over that network. So it's given us the ability, the confidence to invest. We've invested in new stations. We've gone above and beyond government-funded access for all facilities to make our stations fully accessible. We're able to plan jointly. I've got a couple of pictures here. You might be able to see in the middle there the new Bramley Moor Dock, the Hill Dickinson Stadium just at the to the north of Liverpool city centre, which is a stone's throw from Sandhills railway station on the Merseyrail network. So prime example of where we've been able to plan enhanced rail services, enhanced infrastructure, better ticketing to be able to provide good quality, high quality access to Bramley Moor Dock, to the stadium and the huge growth area in North Liverpool in this instance. It's not a case of let's enhance the station and hope that a rail operator might provide some additional services. We can specify that directly. We can put longer trains on, we can put more regular trains on, just as we can do for the Grand National, just as we were able to do for the Eurovision Song Contest. We can control that directly. And we're also looking to, we've been building new stations, filling gaps in the network for 25 years now. And we're looking to expand the network. I'll touch on that in just a second. But the Headbolt Lane station that you can see just at the top of the picture there, that's our most recent station. And that brings in some new innovative technology that I'll touch on in just a second, but we're also very, very proud of. And really the flagship is the fleet of new Merseyrail trains. So part of that devolution deal, part of that control, part of that confidence has meant that we've been able to frankly buy a fleet of new trains ourselves. We own £500 million worth of Class 7/7 trains as a combined authority. They're ours. They can't be taken off us. They were designed by the Liverpool City region. They were designed by end users, by focus groups, by people who wanted to have their say on how those trains should look and feel. And here they are. And we're very, very proud of them. Not without teething problems. You know, any new innovation brings teething problems. But one of the real innovations of these trains, and the picture on the right hand there is at Headbolt Lane, is that they have the ability to run on batteries. So they don't just need to run on a traditional third rail network that is really, really costly. The Office for Rail Regulation don't really like extending third rail networks anymore. They're not seen to be the safest, they're not the most desirable, they need a lot of fencing and controls and so forth. These are trains that can run on batteries. So Headbolt Lane goes beyond the electrified rail network and runs on battery. And these have potential to be game changers and run much, much further. The trains, we're also very, very proud, are fully accessible. And it's an example of where we've turned, and I'm quoting one of my colleagues here, we've turned Victorian railway network into a fully accessible 21st rail network. So it's involved planning the trains with innovative sliding steps. There's more of these starting to happen now. It involved us investing a fair amount of money to raise platforms. It's also involving, quite rightly, new measures to make stations fully accessible from the street. They're the access for all measures, the new lifts, the ramps and so forth. It all needs to work as a package. But these are fully accessible trains. You do not need a member of customer staff or a guard or any member to help you get on the train using a ramp. People can wheel on, whether you're in a wheelchair, whether you're pushing a buggy, you've got heavy shopping, you're pushing a shopping bag, for example. It is just there. It's accessible for everyone, and we're very, very proud of that. Again, that relationship with Merseyrail has been manifested in the fact that we've been able to roll out Tap and Go. So this is the second in the country, and we're proud of this again. We've been able to focus it on Merseyrail. So for the first time now, you tap in, you tap out, you'll never pay more than you need to. The cost of your journey on Merseyrail will be kept. And from hopefully in the new year, you'll be able to use not just one of our Metro passes that I did have around my neck, it's in my pocket now, not just one of our passes, but you'll be able to use Vanc card, you'll be able to use your mobile phone, just as you can in London, and we're all very used to that way of working. Our aim then is to roll that out. But what we've been able to do there to make that happen is work with Merseyrail because of that unique relationship we've got. So we've funded some of the infrastructure, those new ticket gates just in the bottom right there. And again, the Mayor's direct relationship with Merseyrail has enabled us to roll out new innovations. We're proud of the Care Lever ticket that was launched earlier this year. It was led by Merseyrail, who wanted to respond to the Mayor's manifesto commitment to offer free travel to young people that have left the care system at age 18. And we now have 1,500 people in receipt of free travel tickets across the Liverpool City region at no cost to us as a combined authority. It's being funded by bus and rail companies as part of their social value commitment and to support the Mayor. So that is a real first. The ambition is to take it further, is to take Merseyrail further. And again, it's not a power grab. It's not about doing it for the sake of it. It's because one of the big challenges we've got with Merseyrail is it's very constrained. So if you live on the Wirral, if you live, which is on the left bank of the River Mersey, if you live in Southport, if you live in Chester, which is actually in Cheshire, you're very fortunate to be served by Merseyrail and a train every 15 minutes most of the day. However, if you live east of Liverpool, if you live in Huyton, you live in St Helens, you live in parts of North Liverpool, you're not connected to the Merseyrail network. And we're very frustrated that you are reliant on, infrequent Northern Rail services with all the cancellations and all the challenges that go with that. We have a two-tier rail network, which is a real concern to our mayor. So the ambition here is to expand the network further with new stations, potentially take the franchise further. The battery power on the trains that I described is genuinely a game changer because we can run trains beyond the electrified track to destinations that could include Deeside in Flintshire, where there's a huge employment park, to Wrexham, onto Warrington, potentially onto Manchester in conjunction with Mayor Burnham. So that, again, is really, really exciting. The tracks and the signals are still the responsibility of Network Rail. That's really important to clarify. So they're still part of the national rail infrastructure. One of the options now is whether we can achieve greater devolution so we can manage some of those assets directly and be able to integrate our own development plans much more closely with those for the rail network. And you will all have seen as well, we were one of the base business case pilots announced the previous week for Liverpool Central Station. So another great example of devolution, whereby we can move away from the very inflexible nature of a central green book to looking at a business case that works for us. But Merseyrail doesn't sit in isolation. I didn't wake up this morning thinking, right, I'm going to use Merseyrail today. We make a journey. I've used Merseyrail as part of a longer journey to get from home to Leeds in this instance. And this is the beauty of devolution. This is the beauty of bringing all those powers together. Merseyrail is part of, and needs to be a much closer part of, a fully integrated transport network for the city region. So we will become the second in the country to become or to run franchise bus services from next autumn. So in just over a year's time, 2 of our local authorities, 2 of our 6 authorities will have franchise metro bus services, again, enabling us to set routes, set the fares, control the quality for the very first time in 40 years, which is a major step forward. We're also looking to invest in depots and buses that we would lease to operators to be able to level the market, and that would work on a similar basis to Merseyrail, whereby we bought the infrastructure and leased that back. It will integrate, not duplicate. So I caught a bus this morning. The bus, in my case, was going from Southport to Liverpool. There's also rail service that goes from Southport to Liverpool. They do a slightly different thing, but how can we get the rail network feeding, or the bus network feeding the rail network much more efficiently, so we're not duplicating? And it's all about growing patronage, improving connectivity, less traffic, better health, better air quality. It's not a power grab, it's about better outcomes for everyone. I was just asked to summarise and to conclude with a couple of lessons. So hopefully you can see, devolution has been a real success story over a long period of time in the Liverpool city region. Some of the things that have been really important to us and will be important into the future: long-term funding certainty. So with Merseyrail, we've had certainty from central government through what's called a special rail grant. So it sounds a bit technical, but it's effectively the grant funding that funds a lot of Merseyrail year on year. And we've had long-term certainty over that. That's been really, really important. New funds like the city region transport funding, transport for the city regions. We have 5-year allocations there. That is fantastic. We can plan ahead, not look on a year-by-year basis or make ad hoc bids. Merseyrail is also a very self-contained network, so it was relatively easy to detach and control locally because we don't have any freight trains, we don't have any intercity trains running on it, we don't have any Transpennine trains using it. It meets other services at Chester and at Southport, but it's self-contained. We've made a Victorian rail network accessible, and that is a lesson across the country. It's one we're really pushing now. Whenever new trains are purchased, we are making the case that wherever they are, they need to be accessible to all. That control across and between networks is vital, and the leadership that an elected mayor brings with a shared vision with our local authorities is, of course, critical. So I work in the policy field for the first time in 50 years, certainly since the county councils were abolished. We've brought together planning, economic development, transport and funding, and that is fabulous. That's my time up, and thank you very much.
That's brilliant. We don't need to go and try out this new network there, and but as Hugh was mentioning, some critical links as well into the national rail system, and so I'm absolutely delighted that our third speaker is Richard Crabtree. Richard's head of mayoral partnerships at the Shadow Great British Railways. We just had the Great British Railways Bill introduced into Parliament, I think, this week, and he's going to be talking about the role of mayoral partnerships and shaping the future of rail, and how they're actually going to make collaboration just great in theory, work in practice. So, Richard, over to you.
Thanks, Jill, and thanks for the invite here today. So, yes, I'm Richard Crabtree, Head of Mayoral Partnerships for the Shadow GBR leaders. I should emphasise Shadow GBR is not a thing. I've got an accountability to leaders, Laura Schofield, Chev, SGBR, and that accountability is to Network Rail, DSTO, who's leading the public ownership programme, and the Department of Transport. So I will skip through some of the early detail. The rail reform journey, I think most of you know, started in 2018 with the Williams Review, when that was commissioned. That review offered a very clear diagnosis of the problems with the rail industry's fragmented, misaligned objectives, delivering poor policy outcomes as a result of, amongst other things, very confused accountabilities. And in summary, and in my previous role working with Susan and West Yorkshire Combined Authority, that has made the railway classically very difficult to do business with. So I have to say, it's 7 years since the Williams Review was launched, and it was great, therefore, to see yesterday the Railways Bill introduced to Parliament, and that bill, as Lord Hendy says, the Rail Minister, will represent the biggest shake-up in the rail industry for 30 years. So this is what GBR's set out to be: an integrated, publicly owned and publicly accountable directing mind for railway, with customers at its heart. Reliable, affordable, efficient, high quality, accessible and safe. I won't go through all that detail. You can see that in the publications yesterday. Are these slides going to be circulated afterwards?
Looks at
Great.
they can be.
Then that will be great, because it means there's a lot of detail on some of these which I won't cover in the interest of time. So it's great for people listening to know that is the case. So it's important to see mayoral partnership and the agenda we're pursuing within rail reform, not just as part of rail reform, but as a component of the English devolution push as well. So entirely consistent with what we've been talking about here. Now, most of this content will be familiar to this audience, but we find it particularly for working with rail colleagues to build an understanding of strategic authorities, mayoral strategic authorities, as a different entity, one that is growing, developing. We often talk about London as an exemplar. Yes, it's an exemplar for integrated transport, but actually it has a 20-year history of doing strategy different. We've had the Mayor's spatial strategy, the Mayor's growth plans in London. That is what's coming, obviously, to the other, to the remaining strategic authorities, the mayoral authorities, and so on. So strategic empowerment of mayoral authorities is a huge opportunity for doing business with the railway differently. I know a massive opportunity actually for the railway. So mayoral partnerships, nothing short ultimately of a genuine paradigm shift, I would say. Mayors, new and updated statutory roles, both in the devolution and community empowerment bill that's coming through Parliament, as well as the Railways Bill introduced yesterday. Those new and updated statutory roles are a hallmark of the shift away from a deals-based approach in the past, and one that positions mayors and their authorities together as natural partners to the railway, delivery partners with the railway, and with mayors as experts for their places. Places know what is best for them, close to the point of delivery, far more effective decisions and responsive decisions. And through building place-based partnerships, the railway then able to discharge its railway expertise as a network directing mind hopefully far more efficiently. And ultimately, like I say, a railway you can do business with. That's become my catch line. So GBR partnership is being positioned very deliberately as an LTP delivery mechanism that talks to that renewed strategic role, the elevated role for LTPs that's been coming from government for some time. Early engagement in local transport plans, and we're seeing this in practice already around actually most of the mayoral authorities, and particularly in the major urban areas, getting the industry involved in LTP production much earlier on. That actually is a huge opportunity for the railway in terms of building an understanding of local growth and development opportunities, as well as an opportunity for local places as they the railway relationship is positioned to one of trust. And actually, you know, this is based on some of the stuff we've been doing in West Yorkshire for some years, ultimately. So, and that actually ultimately gets you away from that multiple layers of competing rail strategy, which serves no one, actually. It's duplicative. And if you really want to have influence, having several versions of a thing is not the way to ultimately achieve it. So this is the mayoral partnership framework. This is our core product. This is something that we are co-owning with Urban Transport Group members and was developed in the last year or two as part of the reform programme in engagement with the mayoral authorities. What this is proving is to be a very powerful tool to build an understanding of how GBR can and will do business differently in partnership. The focus for this, the focus for mayoral partnership is on local services, where there are funded statutory transport delivery roles. Offers a range of options, responding to different circumstances. The railway performs very different roles in different places. From the example in Merseyside, where it is a huge part of the local transport offer. Places like West Yorkshire, Greater Manchester has a similar case. It performs a fundamental role in getting people in and out of the main centres. That isn't the case everywhere, and as mayoral strategic authorities expand, government has the objectives for full coverage. The sort of partnership, the sort of integration that's going to drive the economy in places, the main urban areas, will be different. And we shouldn't anticipate one size fits all. So while the legislation offers a common set of levers, actually what that does is free up the railway and mayoral authorities to respond in the right way. But that top level of collaboration, the starting point for all the mayoral authorities, is a paradigm shift. It is much more about joint working together, taking the relationship upstream, achieving strategic alignment, and then the depth of partnership that follows is for the railway and a place to determine according to their local needs. And ultimately, in the local commissioning space, you can turn GBR into the sort of partner that can deliver exactly the sort of outcomes that you're talking about with Merseyrail Electrics. And in one sense, it's great to have Merseyrail Electrics as a benchmark of what GBR needs to be as a local partner. So the Venn diagram, I think this really is to land what is becoming very obvious through reform now, which is the railway needs to be accountable. It needs clarity of accountability for itself. It needs to be a decision maker that people can trust and do business with. There's that phrase again. That doesn't mean mayoral authorities getting involved in the railway's decision making, because that contributes to dilution of accountability. No more than it is right that railway should get involved in local decision making. But what that leaves is a very rich joint space for joint investment planning, development of joint strategy, delivery of different commercial initiatives, joint development, and only by having that clarity of accountability can you then come together as partners. And I think particularly this form of public ownership and integration really unlocks the opportunity for that. So creating the conditions for mayoral partnership, this is my final slide. Apologies, the formatting has gone a bit wonky there. That is always a danger of these things. This is not the objectives for GBR. This is what GBR needs to be in order to be a good partner for places. So there's a lot of concern that GBR is going to become this sort of very centralised, unaccountable body. We're working hard to make sure that is not the case. Me and my team are advocates within the process for that. But equally, these 6 principles to underpin what GBR will need to look and feel like, they've got buy-in from the department, they've got buy-in from people working on rail reform. They're not contested actually at all. They're exactly what everyone expects GBR needs to be. So decentralised and integrated across track and train, very low levels, or at the lowest possible level of decision making within the industry across track and train, able to do business. Okay, and that is what then drives accountability, providing mayors, their authorities with single point accountability. We do have a diagram I've used in the past. It's sort of that Spider-Man, you've got 7 Spider-Men. I think it has felt like that for local political leaders working with the railway when something goes wrong. Single point accountability is crucial to unlocking this relationship. Equally crucial, though, is the government being very clear what it wants from the railway and how it's going to fund the railway, because that's the gap, that's the space that unlocks sort of deals that can be done locally where that's appropriate, and ultimately empowers that local engagement. Performance and efficiency driven, obviously, that is going to be a primary objective from the centre. It's going to be a key driver for the railway. In the past, unfortunately, for better or worse, a lot of local leaders have felt that it's their job, and it has been their job, to hold the railway to account for efficient and effective delivery. Yes, that should still be the case, but it shouldn't be the only job of local leaders in the railway in future. That's not about doing partnership. And obviously, when it comes to delivering individual projects, there'll be all kinds of agreements as appropriate. And finally, statutory roles. The statutory roles are not driving these processes. They're the underpinning of that process. That repositioning has taken some time. As we move away from highly contractualized industry, local success, local devolution has taken the form of contracts. That isn't going to be the way that this works in future. GBR will be tasked, it will have a clear set of objectives. Mayors will do business with it, exercising their statutory roles. It won't be the product of a trailblazed devolution deal.
Richard, thank you very, very much. Now, Tom, who knows much more about all of this than I do, is going to give his initial reactions and I think kick off the panel discussion with some questions for all our presenters.
Yeah, so thank you, Susan, Hugh, Richard, for 3 really interesting presentations and case studies. And thank you to all of you here in the room and online for joining us. Really timely and really important. I think one of my reflections from the presentations is about why this matters. And I think with devolution, it's very easy for geeky people such as me to get very excited about integrated settlements, green book reforms, and scheme business cases. But actually this matters, as Susan said, for the economy. You know, Susan talked about the economic size of the price in West Yorkshire, already £66 billion annual economy with a workforce of 1.2 million people. But currently, of that workforce of 1.2 million, only 16% of this of West Yorkshire's people can reach the centre of Leeds in the morning peak within half an hour. And even within Leeds City Council's area, only 38% of the population of Leeds can reach the city centre within half an hour. And the same picture is across other major non-London cities. So I think transport is critical in terms of connecting people to jobs, connecting them to opportunities and connecting employers to a workforce across a broader area, which is so important for driving the modern economy. It also matters because of people, and I think Hugh's presentation really brought that out. You know, this work, if we get this right, it makes a real difference to people's experience of how they use the transport network, how they get from A to B, and how they can access opportunities. So I think it's really important we don't lose sight of the why in all this. I think my second reflection was Susan's point about we now need to, I think you said, Susan, we now need to move into a delivery phase like we have never seen before. And I think, you know, the challenge and the opportunity for combined authorities is to really scale up their delivery capacity and capabilities, but also they need to flex it. So, you know, at times that will be about direct delivery of capital projects, and the Transport for City Regions programme is a big part of that. But it will also be about potentially franchising and specifying services, whether it's bus or in partnership with the rail industry, rail. But it will also be, and I think Richard's really comprehensive overview of the rail industry reforms really showed this, it's about also working with and through others and having influence to a much greater extent as well. And we've been doing some interesting work with Transport for Greater Manchester at the moment around a rail vision that has been really co-produced with the rail industry in perhaps a way that wouldn't have been the case before, to develop that kind of joined up view of the priorities and investment needs over the longer term. I think there is something about how transport comes together with the wider set of powers and resources that combined authorities have, particularly in the context of integrated settlements. We've got JP Spencer from Labour Together in the audience, and JP wrote a really interesting paper recently called Nation Rebalance, where you introduce the concept of growth corridor plans. This has taken a joined up view across transport, housing, spatial planning, economic development skills around how a step change in connectivity in key corridors and in key areas can be taken forward in conjunction with all the other things that are needed to happen to maximise and realise the economic benefits fully. I think West Yorkshire are actually being really far-sighted in doing a spatial development framework around the proposed mass transit scheme, and we're involved in that. And in Bradford, the Bradford Southern Gateway work, where you bring in together with government housing, regeneration and transport planning and investment in a really integrated way. And I think that sort of integrated planning and thinking is going to be really important going forward. And I think to that end, this will require different ways of working across partners, across central and local government. Hugh, you mentioned place-based business cases. I think they provide an opportunity. And I think the reforms of the Green Book, which is one of my favourite topics, will be positive in terms of hopefully bringing a more strategic and place-based approach to decision making. So really interesting presentations, a lot of food for thought, and a big prize if we get it right, I think.
That's a very good place to start our discussion. I'm really interested, first of all, Susan, when you're talking about what you can do to use transport to meet wider objectives, how are you going about thinking about how you deliver the role of transport in delivering sort of more inclusive growth in the region?
So all the transport schemes we're talking about, it should be integrated. In West Yorkshire, we've got the Weaver network, of course, which is not just about the bus franchising, although it's a massive amount of it. But it's also making sure walking, cycling is integrated with that heavy rail is there. At the moment in West Yorkshire, we use heavy rail for intercity connection and intra-city connection. We're using heavy rail for the wrong reasons, really. So everybody needs to feel that they need to be able to get to work, get to good places of work, without it being too costly. And I think, you mentioned about making sure that people can get around cheaply, really, which is it's not just connected, people can get around cheaply. So it's the fares as well. So we're going through now the ticketing strategy at West Yorkshire, and that is key to be able to decide which groups we can target with good fares, because there's lots of different groups lobbying to get on there. Whether somebody who's elderly wants to travel before 9:30, somebody with disabilities, care leavers are mentioned as well. So all that is something we need to bear in mind when we're designing these transport systems, because we've not had that power before. Now we have to use it to the best advantage and make sure it's inclusive, as you say.
And you're giving us quite a sort of long history of Merseyrail, but how, now you've got the mayor with a wider set of policy objectives and things, how's that changed the way you're thinking about the rail network itself? Is that changing it?
I think it is. It's very easy to look at rail as something very technical, and people get all very, dare I say, nerdy about rail elements and crossovers and electrification and so forth. And it doesn't. And for the travelling public, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. It's part of how you get to work. It's how you get to college. It's how you get to Liverpool. It's how you get across the water. It's how you get around for enjoyment. That's what it's about, and how you can do that cheaply and easily, and in a clean and healthy way. Those additional powers, particularly around bus, the funding powers, the wider integrated powers we've got over all forms of transport now, including freight, and freight is really, really important to us as a city region. It means that we can plan it all together as a network. So Richard talked about local transport plans as an important framework. We're just finalising our new transport plan now that brings all those modes together and moves us away from having rail strategy as we might have had in the past. So Merseyrail is there as the backbone. It's now how we can extend it, complement it, feed it, make sure that first and last mile links are better. But fundamentally, it's about how we can deliver better access, better quality of life for people, but it's part of a bigger network.
So we've got a couple of questions here come in. Very interested in your reactions here about how you've thought about incorporating community transport. I think they're actually both from the same person, hi Chanel. How you're incorporating community transport into your planning. What's the role of community transport? How do you see that?
So, I mean, we have a few, I'm just looking at this week, in fact, that we have a few community transport organisations that West Yorkshire Combined Authority do fund to a certain degree, actually. They are, I'll say as we go through franchising, we need to work out our relationship with those as well, because obviously there's a licence to operate now in the West Yorkshire region. So again, it's making us rethink our relationship with all transport providers, because we are moving into a completely new age where we have to review our relationships, and that's not a bad thing actually, because we need to make sure that transport providers like Dales Way, etc., can actually sustain itself going forward, because provide an important role, particularly for our tourist industry. So yes, it's important providers that we still have to engage with.
And we're very similar, absolutely echo those points. I suppose in our transport strategy, we're almost taking the definition of community transport slightly further. We're talking now about shared transport much more. So I'm probably going beyond traditional definitions of community transport here. But one of our big challenges, we have low levels of car ownership. That's not a bad thing in the city region. It's about providing access to people, providing alternatives. So can shared mobility, can e-scooters, can car clubs, e-bikes that are hired by the minute, by the hour, by the day, can they provide part of that mix as well? So yeah, community transport traditionally funded through buses and through grants and so forth, really important. But we're quite interested in looking beyond that as well to some of these new methods of travelling around as well.
Richard, we've got some questions here about advice for areas on the devolution priority programme. Might come to Susan and Hugh more about that, but also what's the advice for areas that lack an obvious devolution geography? Should they really get with the programme and argue for devolution and some sort of strategic authority, because otherwise you won't know how to engage with them, or where does it go?
Well, I'd obviously start by saying it's not for the railway to tell places what they need to do with their devolution ambitions, and Councillor Hinchcliffe made.
But how are you integrating those places into your local partnerships?
The GBR will be a good part of all places, and that's meant the way we land at the base of the framework diagram outside of Merseyrail partnership. I think it is true, and getting alignment with local transport plans, making sure that there is integration locally. And there are great examples now, actually, for example, down in the southwest, where existing county transport authorities are working well with the railway. So we shouldn't see the end of that, and we should see that continuing. But the truth of the matter is, it is a matter of government policy that mayoral authorities are going to be offered deep partnerships, and that's a matter for policy fundamentally.
And what about areas that are on the devolution priority programme, Tom?
I think that's a really good question. So we are on a direction of travel to complete coverage of England by combined authorities, and we've got the 6 combined authorities that will come on stream in spring of next year in Cumbria, where we have an office in Whitehaven, Cheshire, Norfolk and Suffolk, Essex, Sussex and Hampshire and Isle of Wight. I remembered them.
Forget
And
the Isle of Wight.
I think, well, when I joined Arrow a long time ago, I was promised lots of overseas travel, and for 10 years, the only overseas travel I had was to the Isle of Wight. Leave that aside. I think, you know, it's interesting. One of the devolution white paper and the devolution bill that's going through Parliament gives combined authorities powers and roles across a really wide range of things. And I do think there is a risk, particularly for newer and emerging combined authorities, of overstretch and losing sight of the wood for the trees. So my advice would be, have a really clear spatial vision about the projects and places that are going to be most important for growing the economy and achieving positive change for your communities. On one of Richard's slides, it did mention spatial development strategies, but be really clear and focused about the places with the greatest change, with the greatest regeneration and growth potential, and the role that transport, along with other things, whether it's housing, regeneration, economic development skills, can make. Because I think you'll need that clear line of sight to cut through some of the noise and focus and coordinate investment in the areas where it's really going to make a difference.
Susan, we've got these two big pieces of legislation going on at the moment. The Railways Bill just introduced, and we've got the English devolution bill. When those two pieces of legislation on the statute book, do you think that's fine? We've got all the powers we need now in West Yorkshire to deliver the transport vision we need, or will you be going and knocking on Steve Reed and Heidi Alexander's door and say, you led to put all that legislation through, here's something you missed out? Or will you be getting your backbenchers in the region to be lobbying for any changes to those pieces of legislation?
So I think, in my experience, if you're relying on a word of law, you've probably lost the plot, because actually what you need with delivery is to collaborate. And if you're just referring to legislation all the time, then you're going to fail, because actually you're never going to get one team from one organisation delivering everything. You're always going to have, contractors, Network Rail, or GBR, whatever it's called these days, all having to work together, local authorities having to work together with the combined authority, and all that requires people to have the right collaborative culture to get things done. And of course, I'm afraid it also needs quite a lot of money, so the powers are one thing, but the investment is another. And that's why I think Tom's right when he talks about being prioritising what you need to get over the line quickly. I think some of the new devolved authorities as well, they won't have the same capacity that places like West Yorkshire, Liverpool and Manchester have, where we've got a history of being transport authorities for decades, not just 4 or 5 years. And therefore, I think we all need to have our vision of what can be achieved, be clear about articulating that to national and local government and partners, and then all of us get together around the same vision to deliver it. It's great to have the powers, and and the culture of government is more positive towards devolution than it's ever been before, and I really, really welcome that. But of course, as I said in my opening remarks, we are in a constrained financial environment as well, so we need to prioritise, but we need to deliver.
Any bids for more powers?
Well, I think the elephant in the room here is fiscal devolution, actually. Hugh's talked about the history of the Mersey Tunnel, and we can collaborate to our heart's content, but it still feels to get bigger, even modest investments. Susan talked about the platform extension of Bradford Forster Square. I led on the business case. I'm really proud of it because it actually got built.
Yes.
But it was for a new platform, and the hoops you have to jump through to just get the business case approved. Many meetings with many people. So I do think fiscal devolution is something we need, and I think there's an appetite from leaders, certainly across the north, to put some skin in the game here as well.
And what would that mean? Ability to issue bonds, capture some of the development uplift, or quite like they used to gave the Elizabeth line in London, or what?
It could include those. It could include, I think, some control of fare boxing incomes as well. And it needs to be long term, as Hugh said. That 25-year commitment has allowed you to invest in the new trains, for instance.
But from our side, from the transport angle, we have a good range of powers there. We've got most of the powers needed now, whether it's buses. We've got a key route network, we have a single funding pot, we've got a relationship with Merseyrail, and that's being renegotiated, potentially going further. So a lot of those powers are there. In terms of one of the big powers I think that's missing, big issue that our local authorities have raised is around taxis. So real concerns about taxi licensing and out of area working. We don't for 1 minute propose that those powers should move to a combined authority level. We don't believe that's the right solution in our area at all. But we do believe that there should be localism, and that local authorities should be able to control taxi licensing in ways that they can't do now because of the deregulation of the system. And that again is a critical part of that integrated transport network that I was talking about. So that's an ask that we continue to have, and many of our other colleagues do. But the point around raising our own funds is really important. We've done it with the Mersey tunnels, and Mersey tunnel income has helped fund the new trains. Very transparent, very, very clear. The law allows it to happen. We can reinvest that surplus income. We have a mayoral precept. We have a transport levy. We're looking at issues now around a tourist tax, and that's going to be the next stage, is taking it further.
Yeah, I seem to pay a tax last time I stayed in Liverpool, but anyway, when we left out, so I thought you've got a tourist tax there. But anyway, let's go to some questions in the room, because we've done quite a lot with those. Susanna is wandering around with the microphone, so we'll take questions in three. So we've got gentlemen in the back row. Susanna, if you just turn around, tell us who you are, and the more shorter the questions, the more we get in.
Thank you. Okay. My name is Neil Chadwick. I'm from Steer. I'm not giving you the license to ask this question. Imagine in the room about you. Putting that on one of the Transport Planning Society's policy panels, and we recently issued a paper on agreeing a review of 22 recommendations to Treasury, DFT, and devolved authorities, and take things forward. And three things coming from that: we observe that the capacity and capability to develop business cases and assure those is thinly spread. And I think that applies to existing MCAs as well as future devolved authorities. There's a desperate need for greater guidance on the proportionality of business cases, which means actually we think they're currently being applied disproportionately, as in too much time spending 70 pieces of paper to each other. And related to that, also a need for guidance on lighter touch business cases. My question to the panel is, slightly changing the words of the title of the event, is how can the centre help devolved authority to improve transport connectivity?
Okay, brilliant question. Thank you so much. Let's move on to a gentleman here.
Hi, I'm Tom Ford from the Data City. I think we've covered two of the three things already. So Merseyrail has got loads better under local control. My dad still calls it Merseyrail. And we've talked about fiscal devolution. The question I've got is, at the moment, Merseyrail requires a huge amount of subsidy to operate. That comes from central government. Maybe fiscal devolution means it could come from local government, but maybe devolution could help make it more efficient and reduce the amount of subsidy required. What are the plans and the opportunities that devolution allows you to make the local transport system more efficient and require less subsidy?
Okay, and in front row over here, and then we'll come to this side next.
Marina Capley from West Yorkshire Combined Authority. My question is, there's been lots of mentions of how transport can enable opportunities and connects across many of the different areas of competence that mayoral combined authorities are going to have powers and responsibilities within. And we've also, touched on the kind of limited funding, and transport is an area that does require a lot of funding and investment. I'm wondering, are there particular key future opportunities that you can see from how we could better connect up our transport investment to create opportunities and better outcomes that link to the other areas of competence? Could be well-being and health, public safety, economic regeneration, housing. There's lots that's been touched on, but what do you think would be the key opportunities for the future of connecting up those areas?
Okay, fantastic questions. Very good question on the Green Book review about, what does the centre need to do to help? And I want to link it with a question that came in online, which is going to put in, which is relates to this thing about the capacity in some of the combined authorities. And as we spread devolution more widely, there will be areas which haven't had very much experience at all of trying to interact and be a good partner to GBR and things like that. Tom, do you want to kick us off with a broad perspective, then we'll go down the panel on that one?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Neil. And Richard, in his talk in respect to the rail industry, used the phrase fragmented, misaligned objectives. And I think, we talk about what combined authorities and local authorities need to do, but we do need central government to be more joined up and more better coordinated across different departments and agencies and programmes around this agenda. We've seen actually that beginning to happen with the Oxford-Cambridge arc, and with Lord Valence's role and strong Treasury leadership. And that's feeding into decisions that are being made. So, the first phase of East West Rail actually has a really poor benefit to cost ratio of less than 0.6, but government have decided to fund it anyway on the basis of a strong strategic case. I think what we now need to see is something similar in the north of England, and we are hopeful that my former boss, Tom Riordan's new role as government's envoy for the north, is slightly strange phrase to
very strange
have an envoy. We can bring a similar level of coherence of vision and cross-government coordination, but that is really important, both at a North of England level, but also when we get down to individual combined authorities.
Susan, what can the centre do?
So I spent a lot of time when I first became leader lobbying on the Green Book because I thought I was trying to unlock the decisions that are made by government that have been wrong for so many years for places like Bradford. Because I do believe that some people in Bradford have had less healthier lives, less wealthier lives, less happier lives because they lack transport. I think transport is as fundamental as that. That's why I spent so much time on it. And seeing the reforms is great. But actually, at the end of the day, what I've learned is that politicians decide what to do. And I think Tom just said it there, that actually they're doing the Oxford-Cambridge corridor anyway because they want to do it. And it's therefore not just a rational business case, it's the hearts and minds we have to convince as well. Because actually, if people don't do the investment in Bradford and connect us to Manchester, connect us to Leeds, then actually emotionally, I need to make them feel that is a real problem for central as well as local government. And we can't afford not to do these schemes because actually we can't afford the welfare bill if we don't do these schemes. And I think it's all part of making us sustainable as a nation. So we're working really well on the Bradford NPR, Tom's on that board. We've got MHCLG working with us, DFT working with us, West Yorkshire Combined Authority, local authority, all around the same table, making the business case. And that's what central government practically can do to get the business case away. But at the end of the day, politicians decide, and they need to make sure they decide in the right way for particularly Bradford and West Yorkshire. But of course, I would say that.
I think the Green Book can be quite a convenient excuse sometimes.
Exactly.
She says as an ex-Treasury official, but anyway, Hugh, what do you reckon? What can central government do for you? Then I'll come on to the subsidy question. Don't worry.
Two issues. That one. Yeah, we're clearly very, very supportive of the Green Book reforms. There are some real nonsenses in the system now, the preoccupation with value of time. If you don't have access to a car and you're not going to benefit from a road-based intervention, what's it matter? What does it matter? There are much more important things that matter around your quality of life, your health. Any of our city region communities is really, really poor, and that's undervalued. The second part of that is how I think devolution comes in. Devolution of funds means that we can take those decisions locally. Our mayor, our politicians can make those decisions locally rather than going through central government. So what that means is that we can make decisions based on a really strong strategic case. So a decision that supports all of our strategies, our land use plans, our local transport plans and development, but that might actually have a very weak business case in financial terms at the same time. That devolution allows us to make those decisions. So it's not an argument for saying we should spend money on things that are bad, far from it, but there are some things that will have a really whopping strategic case, but perhaps a very poor business to cost or benefit to cost ratio output. Devolution allows us to make those decisions ourselves without having to go for some sort of arbitrary BCR of 2 to make the case. And we've made decisions in the past where they've been low BCRs, but they've been the right things to do.
And Richard, this question about capacity, I'm quite interested in what do you think, when you're talking to partners and trying to develop things, you think people have got a sort of quite good idea, but they actually don't really know how to interact. Is there a strategy for building capacity in these to enable all areas to benefit equally from partnering with GBR?
Well, yes, fundamentally, and part of the work me and my team are doing is to help the industry think about new ways of working, because the relationship's going to be local. It's not going to be people like myself sat in an ivory tower doing this stuff. Everyone is learning new ways of working. There is a surprising amount of good practice out there, though, that needs celebrating. And the examples you cited, Susan, are there about collaboration and indeed the model with Israel. But in truth, it is. And it's sort of have in mind that Wallace and Gromit scene where they're going along the train and laying the tracks before them. We can't wait for this stuff. We've got to crack on. GBR is 2 years away in a pure sense. We can't wait for partnership to, we can't wait until then for partnership to happen. So really, this is all just about a big change program. The one thing I would reflect on in terms of a real depth of partnership, where we see the biggest opportunity, real drive for change within the authorities themselves, is that move into bus franchising, actually, because that is necessarily builds a depth of capacity and capability, a commercial understanding, commercial risk, and those skills are going to be crucial as mayoral authorities get into delivery roles across piece in terms of project planning, investment planning, and so forth. And so very naturally, those authorities going down that bus franchising, and it's those authorities who feel the need to go down that way that are most likely to want to go into the deepest and more involved forms of partnership as well.
Okay, so you learn through buses, basically. It's really interesting. So, Hugh, what are you going to do about this subsidy point? How are you going to generate more passengers?
No, indeed.
Reduce fares, put up fares, I don't know. What are you going to do?
Yeah, and Merseyrail will be renegotiated by 2028. So that will be the end of the 25-year period that was negotiated in 2003. So we'll be going through that commercial negotiation, and clearly there's a range of options on the table. So we know that it's still operated as a franchise through a private sector company. We know there are plenty of examples around the country where they're run in-house or by the devolved administration. So we need to work through all those options quite quickly now. But there's a very simple argument here, which is around driving up patronage. So we need many more people to be using our mass transit systems in the Liverpool City region. That's something we've calculated as part of the development of our transport plan. So we need around 80% more people to be using bus and trains in the Liverpool City region to meet our net zero targets by 2035 and a commensurate reduction in private car trip. So we need many more people using the network to achieve our wider objectives, but that has a direct bottom line as well, of course. That would be more fare box income. The fact that we will have buses under our control as well, and we carry the financial risk for that, means that we can cross-subsidise more, we can ensure much better integration between bus and rail, so you're not losing revenue to the rail network, if you like, artificially. You're feeding the rail network rather than competing with it. So all of these things can start to come together. But yeah, driving up patronage is really what matters for so many reasons and so many outcomes we've set locally.
I'm really interested. It sounds like a really big increase that you need, but Richard, you want to come in?
Well, quite, and I think we must acknowledge that a massive proportion of Merseyrail Electric's costs are in the infrastructure, and driving down cost and efficiency in infrastructure is crucial. It's a massive driver for rail reform, and part of that is driving the accountability for costs, because the accountability for costs in the railway is all over the place. It's what leads to this sort of gold plating. Andrew Haynes offers some really great analysis on this. If we can crack that, and in the case of places like Merseyrail, genuinely offering skin in the game, so that some of those savings are felt locally. At the minute, if because of the underpinning mechanisms, if Network Rail reduces access charges, that's that's not realised locally. So the drivers of costs and the accountability for costs are not there because rail, new stations, new platforms, they shouldn't be costing what they're costing by any means, and driving accountability through all of that has to be central to rail reform.
And do you accompany this with a strategy, Hugh, to get people out of cars? I mean, to sort of make it more difficult to, because obviously in London they have, bus passenger ship, etc., stays high because you'd be absolutely muppet to drive a car around central London because it's impossible. But do you have a strategy on that?
Absolutely, it's part of the transport plan. We need our strategy to be based on road space reallocation. So we need to be creating much more space for buses to have priority. As I said, we will be controlling those directly from next year. So if buses are stuck in traffic, that's our bottom line. As well as inconveniencing passengers and putting people off. There's nothing worse than being stuck on a bus, is there? So bus reallocation, reallocating road space for walking, cycling and wheeling is going to be absolutely critical. We have demand management tools already through the Mersey tunnels and the Mersey Gateway between Widnes and Runcorn. They're also tolled crossings. So all the main crossings across the Mersey are tolled. If they weren't tolled, all our modelling suggests that traffic growth and traffic conditions would be quite intolerable. But that said, much as I believe in devolution and we believe in devolution, we also believe there are certain things that sit nationally. And one of the big issues, and I saw it this morning, I was pleased to see it, is again a suggestion about moving to a national road pricing system, because we believe in our transport strategy that is the right approach, much as we believe in devolution.
But it sounds as though it's going to be a very by and large, if it's just based on how many miles you do per year, it's not going to be anything like sort of Singapore or congestion charge or anything. If we, it's a relief that the Treasury seems to be thinking about how to replace fuel duty, which news to me. But anyway, Tom, you're going to offer some free advice to.
Well, I certainly think road space reallocation and demand management. If you go to Bradford's had a very successful clean air zone, which has really delivered great health impacts. But also, if you haven't been, go to the centre of Bradford, because it's been transformed through public realm over the last couple of years. But I also agree about driving down. I think more local leadership and better collaboration can drive down the cost of transport infrastructure. That's a big part of the Bradford new station proposition. Yeah. It's a big part of the work that we've been involved around the Leeds existing station programme, and it's a big part of the proposition around the Liverpool-Manchester Railway, something that is locally led, but in partnership with national government, can perhaps avoid the mistakes of big transport schemes in the past. But I think the other way, and just linking into Mariana's question, which great question, we can drive up passenger numbers and revenues is by creating more dense development around stations and tram and bus and tram stops. And so actually I think there's a real opportunity, in the centre for cities have sort of done some interesting work about if Leeds was as dense as Marseille, it would support much better transport. So I think integrated transport and spatial planning and joining up housing and regeneration investment across combined authorities and Homes England with transport investment is a big part of what those sort of outcomes your question was driving at can be delivered.
Yeah, so we talked a bit about wider outcomes in the conversation about business, but Susan, would you like to respond to Mariana just on actually how you see transport with all these better outcomes that she was identifying?
Yeah, so Southern Gateway is obviously a big regeneration programme for us. It is based around the station, but actually it opens up hectares of new employment land with housing sites, which should be right in the city centre to make people connected to Manchester in 30 minutes, where it's over an hour now. So all that is about jobs, growth, about better health outcomes for people. And, I'd like to have the university close to that station as well. So it starts to open up a lot of opportunities. I'm just talking, go back to efficiency, actually. You talk to a local government leader about efficiency, where we're asked £60 million of our budget this year. We're going to take out next year, £50 million last year. So we are quite good at this stuff in terms of efficiency. And the only reason that Foster Square didn't work 14 years ago, because nobody nationally realised that they couldn't put 7 trains a day in from London because they didn't have a platform big enough to accommodate it. And it wasn't until we went into that detail locally, we pointed that out, and then we got something done. So it's from efficiency point of view and local knowledge and drive, that's how you get things done. And that was delivered on time and on budget, was that thing as well.
Okay, let's go over here. We've got proliferation of questions. Try and do 2 more rounds. So we'll start at the back. gentleman at the back, and then here, and then we'll pick up. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Solomon Westmacott, I work for Infrastructure Matters. So my question follows on from kind of some of the Green Book reforms conversation, and another mechanism in which central government, but also local government, has influence over delivery of transport infrastructure is the is planning policy. So with bearing in mind that you can use kind of the Green Book as a mechanism to block things that you aren't particularly attractive politically, the same thing could definitely be said of the Nationally Significant Infrastructure Project DCO scheme. So my question is around what role do devolved authorities have in making planning decisions? Would there be support for maybe something like a regionally significant infrastructure project programme where combined authorities would have the power and influence to make the final call on that sort of scale of infrastructure project? And how can combined authorities work with both central government and also local government to make sure that planning policy works at a regional sort of scale?
Oh, I can't believe we got to here and hadn't discussed planning policy. Fantastic question. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Monta just over ETG. Hi all. We've heard from Richard a lot on the accountability in rail and obviously the new approach. I'd be interested in the panel's views in general on sort of accountability mechanisms as we move to deeper devolution. So, you know, how do you see this maturing? That's something that works for residents, for local leaders, for central government, obviously, but also for MSA sort of holding government to account. How do you see that relationship maturing?
Okay. And I think there was another question. Yeah, gentleman.
Hi everyone, JP Spencer from Labour Together. I also write a lot about the North of England on Substack, and I'm a former head of the Green Book, so from all three perspectives, loving this conversation. We published a report with the Centre for Policy Studies and the Centre for British Progress recently called Let Mayors Build. And in that we touched on some of the themes that the panel have been talking about, and we said that and to one of the other questions, actually, this is another one about planning. We said that we need to bring approvals closer to places so that, for example, within the integrated settlements, you've got a £200 million business case threshold that remains even for places that are meant to have an integrated settlement. And you also still need to go to the Secretary of State for planning approval and like transport and works act orders. We said those kind of things should be devolved so places can get on with things. And we talked about fiscal devolution. So it's been chat about tourism levies. There's also the example of the business race supplement that's used for funding Crossrail. Wondered what the panel thought of those ideas and whether there's anything that we missed in terms of unlocking the power to let mayors build.
Okay, well, I think let's bundle the first and the third question together about actually, do we have the planning powers in the right place for you to do things, and you know, other powers you need to make regionally significant projects happen? Susan.
Yes, so planning. I think so first of all, with devolution do come planning powers to combined authorities. So things like strategic route network, for example. What you can't have is you can't have a bus lane going up to the border of Kirklees and not continuing through Bradford. So that is absolute common sense that it needs join up at that level. And in West Yorkshire, and I'm sure this is probably the same everywhere else, you know, the local authorities have a vote equal to the mayor, actually, in most decisions of the combined authority. So it has to be a collective decision to do these things. So it's not, what we can never get into is the combined authority saying, oh yes, this has to happen, and the local authority saying it shouldn't happen in my patch, because that's it's just not going to work, is it? There'll be other obstructions put into place. So it has to be collaborative, I'm afraid, and it needs to make sure that you know, all the local authority leaders and combined authority mayor is on side to get things done. When it comes to local level accountability, I do think that's really challenging now, isn't it, in local plan decisions? Housing is something that, you know, people regularly have campaigns against, and local politicians go and campaign against them as well, which always frustrating, because actually we don't tell people the truth enough about planning. We don't tell people it's a legal framework. We don't tell people it's a cross-party decision, and therefore different politicians use it for their own ends. People need to understand how planning decisions are made and how they can influence those, and they do need to see quality at the end of it. if they know they're going to get quality houses that they themselves and their family can enjoy, quality spaces, quality facilities, then they will go along with it. If they see poor quality bill going up, or something happening which is contrary to how they see their community, then they are naturally going to be against it. So we have to have the time and the community engagement to do things with people and not to people, and that's no matter where the decision is made, whether that's national, regional, or local. We need to spend more time doing that, and in a fast-paced environment where we need to get delivery done quickly, that investment of community engagement up front becomes more important, and that's what we should all try and endeavour to do, to make sure that plan decisions are made at the right time, right place, with the right people in mind.
You're planning to have the right place?
I'm a town planner by background, so I have no interest at all in planning. But it's one of the, as Councillor Hinchcliffe said, it's one of the big benefits of devolution. That previously, land use planning was a local authority function. When I worked in Merseyrail, we were a transport body. We had no relationship between that planning process. Now we're producing a spatial development strategy for our city region, in tandem, no transport pun intended, with our local transport plan, with our economic strategy, with our low carbon plan, with our air quality plan. They all talk the same language, to the point that we have a movement hierarchy in our transport plan that's exactly the same as our spatial development strategy: people first, private car bottom. So we've got those powers. We have the powers to be a statutory consultee. We have the powers to call in potentially. It's probably too late if we get to that stage, though. I think the key for me is proactive planning from the start, and it's about selecting the sites that are the most accessible and using accessibility to guide future allocations.
And if you want to join up with Manchester on something, do you have a forum where you can actually talk about what does this mean for the Northwest, not just the Liverpool City region and Greater Manchester? Do you have a sort of adequate join there? If you were trying to build a growth corridor between Liverpool and Manchester, does that work, or is that at the moment going to be, Steve Bosman versus Andy Burnham saying, no, it's me, or whatever? How does it work?
Liverpool Manchester is a very good example where the two mayors are working directly together. We have many alliances, whether it's Transport for the North.
The Rail Board.
There are many examples out there. UK mayors working together, the Urban Transport Group, Liverpool Manchester Board as a very good example, as I said right at the start. So it's important we don't just look within our boundaries, because it's a bit of a cliche, but we do say the Liverpool City region is not an island, it's not a cul-de-sac, it's part of a much bigger network.
And what about this sort of, a sort of accountability? Is there a danger that all this sort of partnership, ends up, it could be wonderful, it could just be an excuse for, lots of butt passing, pass the pass, it's not me, it's them, and stuff like that. So, do you think we're clear enough about who does what, and people will know where to go to with their complaints?
Certainly, the drive for reform is to establish that greater accountability, but a key success of GBR has to be that GBR's leadership feels accountable.
So something like the timetable collapse that we heard a lot about a few years ago, would it now, under the new arrangements, be clear?
Well, yeah,
Who was responsible for that?
December coming. So
let's see, indeed, and that is going to be the acid test. And at the minute, in future, you should be able to point to individuals who have made decisions who can then be accountable for those decisions, and that's what drove problems before. In terms of local accountability, to Monta's question, though, it is a crucial question, and the mayoral model itself is meant to drive more accountability, isn't it? But it's a fascinating one, and I don't have the answer. It's sort of beyond my remit.
Yeah. As also a town planner, as indeed I'm going to out Richard as well here.
No, I sometimes think I should have been being a planner. I'd like to be fun.
I'm almost as excited as I am about Green Book reform as I am about the introduction of spatial development strategies for combined authorities, but I think getting them right will be critical. And I do worry that we're going to end up with really long documents that fall into the trap of everythingism and lack sort of focus and prioritisation. The London planning now is over 500 pages, and I think we don't want 500-page documents. But I think they'll be really important. And to JP's question, JP, I have got nothing against. In fact, I'm in favour of giving mayors powers to decide around infrastructure projects. However, I also think the process, particularly the Transport and Works Act order process, we've done some work, can be made faster, can be made cheaper, and can deliver better and greener outcomes. So as well as who makes the decision, I think we've got to look at how we speed up and improve the process up to the decision as well. Yeah.
Right, and now I've slightly run over time. There's a lady here who I didn't let ask a question, who's going to get final question.
Thank you, that's nice of you. I'm Elizabeth Shovelton. I work in the Department for Transport, and I really wanted to ask about safety on transport. As someone who's recently moved to Leeds, I like public transport. My area has one bus an hour after about 9 o'clock. To get the bus, you have to go to the bus station, which is not the most wonderful place to have to wait for a bus. So I think I'd be really interested to know how, in a world of franchising, and particularly, Susan, with the trams, which I think are fantastic, you're going to make sure that particularly women and vulnerable people feel this is a thing I can use that will be safe for me. Because I can tell you, my neighbour, who's an older lady, doesn't like using the buses because she feels unsafe. So I'd really love to know what's being done to factor that in. Thank you.
That's a brilliant and often neglected, as indeed we were all about to do, final question. So let's just go through the panel and actually, how do we make, we talk about accessibility, and you actually managed to have a picture, Richard, didn't you, of Hugh, of a happy Tanny Gray Thompson, which I think is a definite achievement. But actually, how do we make people feel safe in public transport? Hugh.
So absolutely, couldn't agree more. In our local transport plan consultation, personal safety was the #1 issue that came back as the priority. So of all the issues, personal safety. So it's about the whole journey, and I think it's from your home to your destination. And it's not just about making sure that the bus is safe, it's lit, it's got CCTV. What's that journey like? And I think a lot of that is to do with the townscape that we've got, the townscape that we've built. We've often prioritised traffic above people for far too long. So if you've got to walk through a dark subway, I don't like walking through subways, I'll avoid them. And that is a real factor that will make your journey unsafe. So the more work we can do, just like the examples around opening up our urban centres, creating accessible, livable spaces, that will make the end-to-end journey safer. But we have very practical initiatives. We have the Merseyrail trains are really open. There's a second member of staff there to supervise and to make sure that any incidents are dealt with. We have the Travel Safe campaign on our bus and rail networks to be able to take action and to reassure. They're absolutely crucial issues, but I think there's a wider sort of almost a planning angle to it about what sort of places do we want to create, and we've got to think about all of those beads in the necklace together.
Richard.
Yeah, as I noted, safety is one of the Secretary of State's 6 objectives for rail reform. The railway can do its bits to make the network safe, but there is that total journey point, actually offering confidence around connections, the wider environment, because people will take those travel decisions thinking about the whole. One of my favourite statistics I've not mentioned actually is the incentive for the railway to get this right with places as well. There's a £1 billion of unrealised headroom from achieving modal shift off cars into the railway network nationally. If you can get people to and from railway stations more effectively, that is a huge commercial opportunity. So there's a good reason to address safety, not just because it's the right thing to do, but actually commercially it makes sense. And driving all the behaviours, making sure you've got integrated information, offering certainty. I know travel safe officers are increasingly a feature of local transport networks. As part of the work we're doing, or the railway is doing with GM and GM and driving, getting travel safe officers into the railway environment is and I can see that's direction of travel in other places too.
Susan.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, surveys show that it's a massive important issue for our Yorkshire Combined Authority as well that needs addressing. And Mayor Tracy Brabin also made it one of the principles of her leadership as a mayor. We obviously have travel safe officers, as you say, on our transport network, paid for out of our BSIP funding. We've taken subways out, actually thinking about it, of when we did pedestrianisation. So that's something that I think we all realise was a 1970s failure of transport. And I think at the end of the day, you know, regardless of travel safe officers, we need more patronage on public transport to make people feel safer in the environment, because we please each other, don't we, at the end of the day? You know, we've seen a decline in bus usage in West Yorkshire this time, I'm afraid. It's great that Manchester's seen, I think, was it 30% increase I've seen there through post-franchising. So we're hoping that once we control the network, it'll make it easier to attract more people onto that network, and therefore make people more confident with their travel and safer. So yeah, lots of different levers we can pull, but I think we all recognise it's a major issue that we have to tackle.
Because the big trick is to pull up a virtuous circle, isn't it? More people feeling safe, and therefore more you know, women travelling, and then you feel safer in numbers and stuff like that, which you know is absolutely critical to that. More women planners, I think that's
absolutely. More women
as well, because there's really interesting things about how different cities are if you think of them about women rather than men. But that's a different issue, not what we're here to discuss today. So I'm going to call it a close for today. I want you all to thank our absolutely fantastic panel for all their excellent, fantastic insights here. Just thank Arup for sponsoring the event today and hosting us in their fantastic building in Wellington Place, which is really nice, even if the numbering is slightly challenging. She said, having to send a message saying, where is their building? Can I thank L&G for their more general sponsorship of DevoLab. If you've enjoyed it, great. Watch out for more DevoLab events on different topics. And we will have a video and sound recording available on the IfG website. So tell your friends, family, whomsoever else that they can watch or listen back as they're sitting on fantastic integrated transport across the region. So thank you all very much for coming. And I think that we have some more things outside, so you can stay, hobnob and network away. So thank you all very, very much for coming.